Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is Know Before You Go, Botswana Safaris, and it will be presented by our fabulous Nat Hab Expedition Leader, Russell Gerber. Russell, thank you so much for being here today. There are so many folks who have been looking forward to this webinar for a long time, and I cannot wait to go back to Botswana for the next hour with you. So let's dive in.
Thank you, Sunny. Great to be back, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another exciting edition of the Daily Dose of Nature, with, of course, the little twist of talking about Botswana as a whole and knowing before you go. For those of you who might be joining us on a wonderful trip to Botswana this year, or might be thinking about joining us on a trip to Botswana. So thanks so much, all of you, for being here. Without further ado, we're really going to dive right in, because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to safari in Botswana. Just quickly, just so you know who you're chatting to this evening, wherever you may be. My name is Russell Gerber. I've been an expedition leader with Natural Habitat since 2018. I'm actually a zoologist and a marine biologist, and I've been in the safari and marine field since about 2004 now. So this is 20 years in the field, which has been wonderful, and I'm very fortunate to do what I do. So for those of you who haven't met me before, that's just a little bit of my background, and hopefully I can get to meet some of you on a Botswana safari this year. Our topic this evening, it is 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the evening here in Cape Town, where I'm chatting to you from. We're going to go into a few little details about Botswana, of course, where it is, for those of you not too sure. Where do you go on safari? What are the hot spots or highlights that people go to? When is the safari season? We'll talk a little bit about the weather, the wildlife, and your daily safari experience. So what to expect on those terms. And then for those of you who are going, how you should prepare, perhaps what to pack or bring along, or give some thought to bringing along on your safari. So those are the topics we'll be covering today. And as I say, there's quite a lot to get into. So Botswana, if you're not sure where it is, even if you are coming, but you're not entirely sure exactly where it is on the map, you'll see it is, of course, in Africa, and in the southern part of Africa, that dark green highlighted point there, a landlocked country neighbored by Namibia to the west. We've got Zambia to the north, we got Zimbabwe to the east, and South Africa to the south. So a landlocked country that, of course, is home to some of Africa's most incredible wildlife destinations and wildlife itself. So zooming in on the country, and here you can see the major points that we'll be chatting about this evening are the dark green areas that you can see on our map here, and those are the national parks and really the wildlife hotspots of Botswana itself. If you look at the northern or the top part of the map, you'll see that there's two little airports there. One just at the bottom of that body of water called Maun, and right up at the top right of the map, you'll see a little red dot that is Kasane. Those are the two major airports that will get you into your adventure into Botswana, and that is the route that most of you will be flying when you come on a trip with us. Generally, you'd be flying into Johannesburg in South Africa and then taking a short flight up to either Maun or Kasane, depending on where you're starting your safari from for your experience down here. And then there'll be a few different hotspots that you'll be visiting on your trip, wildlife hotspots that we focus on various itineraries. And we're going to touch on some of those this evening. So this is all these photographs that you'll see today, folks, are photos that I've taken on safaris in Botswana. And we will be touching on what each of those locations are. This one was taken from the Chobe River, one of those hotspots we chatted about earlier, and I'll go into that a little bit further on in our chat. But The first thing I wanted to chat to you all about is, when is the safari season? When is it the most popular time of year to come to Southern Africa and to come on safari in Botswana? Most people tend to come between June and September, mainly the winter months of Southern Africa. Traditionally, that has been the case because it tends to be a little bit cooler in these areas, which can get very hot in the summer. It also tends to be a little drier, which means the bush is not quite as thick, often making it a little easier to see animals, and often you get some good luck, and it's a little easier to go off-road because there's not as much mud around. And as I say, in the evenings, it actually tends to get quite cool and cold even, which for many people is far more attractive than what can be very hot summer nights in the summer months. Another reason that it tends to be so popular is, of course, it is mainly the vacation time for those coming from the Northern Hemisphere on a vacation. From Europe, the UK, and of course the USA, that tends to be the time where most people can travel. So that has also pushed up the busyness of this time of year for safari. So the safari season, June to September, has always been that traditional time to come. Yet another good reason is there's very little rain in our winter months in these regions, and you don't tend to get storms or any inclement weather. So that again is another big attraction for people to come. In fact, many days of safari, throughout that period, there is not even a sign of rain. So a lot of people, of course, are attracted to that as well. But many people ask us, does that mean we should only go on safari in winter? And the answer, of course, is absolutely not. You can go on safari anytime. I've done a webinar here on the Daily Dose of Nature on safari in the green season. We'll be doing another one later this year, and chat about that as well. But going on safari at that time of year is wonderful. And in this chat today, I'll touch on the different seasons in these different locations, and what to look out for at different times of year. But honestly, they are all good times to go. These reasons that I just gave you is the main kind of outline of why people tended to come on safari more in the winter months of Southern Africa. And then, as I said to you, we're going to dive into, where do people go? What are the most interesting and highlight hotspot points of Botswana that people tend to go on safari to? Well, the first one we'll start with today. We're going to start pretty much in the central parts of Botswana, and then move up north to the main sort of wildlife locations along the river systems up there. But we'll start with the desert and semi-desert area, which makes up the vast majority of Botswana, and that is, of course, the Kalahari and the Makgadikgadi salt pans. This was a picture taken on the edge of the pans. You can see that very dry soil. And this was actually taken in the summer months. You can actually see the clouds in the background building up. So we were actually, we got a bit of rain while we were there as well. And it often brings these big herds of animals, particularly zebra and wildebeest, to the Kalahari region in the summer months. And it's one of the reasons why, if you are going on safari to the Kalahari this year on one of your stops on our itineraries, and you're going in the summer months, the migration of the zebra and wildebeest that actually move through this region in the summer months is really quite something to see. And I'm hopeful that you'll be lucky enough to catch it. These kinds of movements have long been known about, but people really spoke about them more anecdotally, and there wasn't a lot of real scientific research put into what was going on with this migration of the zebra and wildebeest. Of course, the most famous is the one in East Africa, of course, which we do wonderful trips to as well. But in more recent years, in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a lot more focus put onto this movement of the zebra and wildebeest around Botswana. And I'm going to show you on a map now what that looks like and where they actually go. But often you will find yourself a part of it if you are there at certain times of the year. The driest months they tend to spend around the river systems of the northern parts of Botswana. And I'll show you that on the map in just a second as well. The Chobe, Kwando-Linyanti region and the Okavango are those northern parts, and that's where they tend to spend the most of their months. But during this wetter time of the year, where the rains arrive and they have water to drink, it often drives this fresh grass growth around the Kalahari, which of course in turn attracts these grazers from all over the country, not just zebra and wildebeest, but even buffalo and elephant who will make their way down to the Kalahari regions. One of the reasons that we think they do this, some of the studies show that the grasses of the Kalahari actually have a very high protein content and very high in minerals as well, higher than that they find up in the Okavango and Chobe. So this is one of the reasons we think that the zebra move. It's not like there's a shortage of food around the Chobe or Linyanti when it does get drier, because those are permanent river systems. But we think that high nutrient grass is what's driving them down to the south, and is one of the big reasons why people love to go on safari in the Kalahari. But of course, one of the biggest reasons is the gorgeous scenes that you get, like I've shown you already in some of those photographs of the open plains, wide open flat areas of the Kalahari itself. Just quick though, let's cover where those zebra go. You'll see here in blue the zebra hanging around the Okavango region. Those are the two zebra pictures in the bottom of your screen. The two at the top closer to the Linyanti and Chobe river systems. And around November to February, those zebra all start moving south towards the Kalahari pans. And the reason I'm telling you this all now is that it is often people feel like the Okavango, the Chobe, Linyanti are the only places to go for your wildlife experiences. But in truth, there are wonderful things to see from a wildlife point of view in the Kalahari region, the Kalahari region, particularly around this time of year, February to April or so. Once we get to around this time of year, they've been hanging out in this region like I spoke about, and after a little while, those zebra will start moving north, back up into the Maremi, the Okavango Delta region, and of course up towards Chobe as well, where they have their permanent water systems. The Chobe River, of course, being the river that forms the border between Botswana and Namibia. So the Kalahari, this is another picture taken in the Kalahari, by the way, is of course not just those animals. You have the opportunity for seeing some of the most famous lions, which are the black-maned lions. This is a female, just a photograph that I really liked. She was looking up at a vulture that was flying by. But this migration brings, of course, with it predators that will be waiting for these wildebeest and zebra to arrive. And many of these lions rely on this migration for them to get there. So again, you have great opportunity for seeing some big predators in the region of the Kalahari. But that's not what it's all about, of course. There are small things to see as well that are just as interesting. And one of the highlights of the Kalahari for most people is the opportunity for seeing meerkats. Meerkats that have been habituated and can sometimes get the opportunity to actually get off the vehicle and go up on foot to these habituated wild meerkats that can sometimes get very close, and of course are always very cute and fun to photograph, and it's always fun getting out of the vehicle every opportunity you can. So meerkats, definitely one of the highlight species that many people are on the lookout for. These are just another couple of photographs that I took of lions in the Kalahari. This was after the rainy season. You can see the grass coming through in what is generally a very, very arid region. So again, the opportunity and the change in all these environments is so noticeable. No matter which time of year you go, you're going to be in for a treat when it comes to your experience. And as I say, these photographs really cover just about any time of year in all of these regions. Then for the majority of the trips that we do in the Botswana region, we spend a lot of that time up in the north. The reason for that, as I showed you in the map, is that is really where the majority of our water systems are, and permanent water systems. So in a country that is really very much a desert-ridden country, those water systems are essential to the survival and the flourishing of the animals that we see in this region. The popular areas that you would know of and the ones that we visit on our trips are, of course, the Okavango, Linyanti, Selinda and Savuti areas, and of course the Chobe River, which, as I said, is the border between Botswana and Namibia. So as we move into the April-May time of year, things start to change in Botswana. And though it tends to be the driest time of year from a rainfall point of view, what many people are not aware of is the arrival of the floods that come into the Delta, from flood waters that started all the way up in Angola, north of Botswana, and eventually make their way down into the Delta. This water flows in and becomes the lifeblood of the Okavango in the driest months of the year. So though we are receiving very little rain this time of year, around the Okavango, Linyanti, the Selinda spillway, and the Chobe regions, all of this gets really absolutely puffed up with water from those flood waters in Angola, and gives us this amazing landscape that you see in this photograph of the Okavango Delta and its various panhandles flooding during every annual season around about June through September. More often than not, the water starts to arrive around May. It depends on the rain and when it actually does arrive in earnest up in Angola. But normally around May to June, you'll start getting the water coming in. July and August, you'll often have your highest water levels within the Delta. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean it's completely flooded and there's nowhere you can go? Well, absolutely not. Of course, you can. There are a number of little islands, some of them very big, Chief's Island being the biggest, and part of Moremi Game Reserve, where we spend a lot of our time on safari. So though there are fewer areas you can drive, this incredible ecosystem is something really to behold, and is often when people are most excited to see the Okavango, and the game viewing is, of course, wonderful this time of year as well. But by the time we get to October, all of that water that has flooded into the Delta has started to dry up. And all through evaporation, because of the high temperatures that you find here, by the time we get to October and into November, the only waters that are left are the main water channels, the Panhandle, certain channels of the Delta itself, and of course the Linyanti and Chobe rivers. And at that time of year, many of the animals, of course, are forced to congregate towards these river systems. Things get very dry, and because of that congregation of animals, the predators themselves start to get the upper hand. You can see this picture here behind it is of vultures hanging around a water hole that many animals had seen the end of their lives due to being taken by lions, leopard, wild dogs, etc. Because as it gets drier, it's very difficult for those herbivores to keep their condition, and it makes it a little easier for the predators to hunt them. So, as I said, many of the species are forced towards these river systems, and this cyclical predator-prey relationship is again essential to the ecosystems of the Okavango. So, coming into, we've spoken about how wonderful it is to be on safari in the winter months. Well, going into October, November, December can also be a wonderful time to be here because of the very higher percentage of chances of seeing some predation activities and successful predation. If you're into that sort of thing, not everybody is keen to see murder in the Okavango, but it does happen and is a part of life. And for some people, that is a big highlight of their safari. So, of course, that time of year, you have great opportunity for seeing predators. Remember, folks, big caveat here, anything can happen on safari. You can see any of these animals at any time. It all comes down to luck, the skill of your guides and safari guides and expedition leaders with you, getting you in the right position to get to these animals and getting the best opportunity to see some of these special ones. Cheetah, of course, is a possibility. Leopard, this was a young female leopard that was frolicking in the grass next to us. She was laying out right next to our vehicle while we were watching her, and she was merrily relaxing in the early morning. And the opportunity for great photographs, of course, is massive any time of year. As we get to the end of that last bit of flowering season, it is again an opportunity for some predators to actually ambush their prey. This is a poor impala that saw its end from that leopard in this previous slide who had pulled her up in this tree after capturing her underneath it from feeding from the flowers and fruits that were coming from it. So this is all part of the adventure, but as I said, the opportunity is always there any time of year. And the starkness, of course, of this environment, particularly towards the end of summer, you often will see skeletons and skulls and various things that have been left behind from all these predator-prey interactions. And again, there's always opportunity for some great photography while you're out on drive. So the rainy season, from around November, we start seeing the rain coming. And then from November to February is really the rainy season, and when we get the vast majority of our rainfall itself. They tend to be short, sharp storms, much like this one. You can see the beautiful sunlight capturing these trees and these little floodplains. Short, sharp storm, and then in about half an hour, it was all over. Sky opens up, and you've got beautiful stars above your head. But one of the great things to be on safari in the rainy season is for the opportunity of babies. Normally around November, December, we start seeing a lot of our young babies, particularly from the herbivores that get dropped, and there's opportunity for seeing them. I've got a picture of a little baby elephant here, but don't worry if you're not here in November, December. Baby elephants are born any time of year, so you have the opportunity for seeing these little babies any time. So don't worry if that's the picture you wanted to get. Safari in the winter time, you could see plenty of baby elephants as well. Some of the predators also, their cubs can come any time of year, but they tend to kind of spike around the same time as when the young babies of their prey are around in the summer months. But the babies that you're likely to see in those summer months, impala, zebra, red lechwe, kudu, and even wildebeest, of course, around that time of year. So always the opportunity for babies in the wet season, but as I said, any time of year is a good time. So for a short time of year, there is an abundance of this young prey, and it's often a time of plenty for the predators. And again, it gives them just that little bit of the upper hand for those few months. Once you get to the end of summer, all of those herbivores have got their condition back again, much stronger, and are suddenly make things much more difficult for the predators, and it gets a little harder for them to catch their food. So once that happens, the tables start to turn against them, and of course it's their turn to go a little hungry for a while and to struggle through until the next time of plenty. Birding any time of year is great to be in Botswana, but of course around the summer months you do often get an increased number of birds just from our summer migrants that visit us as well. So for those of you who are really into your birding, coming from around November, October, November is often the best time of year to get the most species. But once again, we have a number of wonderful residents that will be here all year round that are often highlights of the trips for people coming out on safari. So this is a yellow-billed stork, and always opportunity to see lovely water birds all over the delta. Another thing that often is overlooked, of course, is flowers. We have flowers that do bloom any time of year. We've got different periods and different species that actually flower at different times. So there's always opportunity for seeing flowers, particularly on the water channels themselves, the day and night lilies, which you're likely to see on some of your Mokoro excursions. The Mokoro excursions, of course, the little boat excursions in the dugout canoes that you will hopefully do, some of you, on your trips coming down to Botswana. So now I hear you all thinking, okay, that's great, Russell, I want to go, and I'm going. What can you tell me all about it? Just by the way, this was a picture taken from one of our little boat cruises in the Linyanti. That is an elephant trunk just sticking out of the water. It was a big bull elephant who was feeding in the deep water, and his trunk just stuck out the water just perfectly like that. It was a fun photograph to get. So something you could look forward to as well. So how do we get around the Delta? How do we get to the camps? Well, the truth is many of them are very remote, and the only way to get into the camps is to fly on our small aircraft. This is one of the bigger planes that we would occasionally use, but most of our planes would be a single turboprop or just a single prop. Cessna Grand Caravan tends to be the most common that will take you into camp. So you will land on some gravel runways and short flights of 20 to 40 minutes or so. So generally not too long of a time, but these wonderful bush pilots will get you safely into your camps. And this is generally the way we will bounce between camps or while we're out on our safari. So that's going to be your main your main form of travel while you're moving between the camps. But for the most part, you will spend the vast majority of your time in a safari vehicle. Most of them are Toyota Land Cruisers like this one. Some of them are the old Land Rover Defenders. But basically, there will be these tiered seated vehicles. And for all of our trips, you will always have a window seat and the opportunity to not be overcrowded, which would have 2 people per row. And we do ask that while we're out on safari that you guys switch up your seating each day and each drive, just to mix things up and to make it fair for everybody to get a good position. But as you can see, very comfortable, and you would spend your morning of about 3 to 5 hours out on drive, early morning from about 5:30 a.m. to around about 10 o'clock or so, depending on your drive. And then you'd have the middle of the day to relax, and then in the afternoon, head out on your safari again. This is us on safari, having a little coffee and tea stop out on our morning drive. And as you can see, I did want to touch on something. From a weather point of view, it can get quite chilly on safari, even in Botswana. So if you are going in the winter months, make sure that you have brought along jackets and beanies and gloves and things that are warm that you can take off while you're out on your drive. It does warm up quickly, but you'll be sad if you don't have your warm stuff, particularly if you're someone who gets cold. But driving in the open vehicles out on drive can get quite chilly, so just make sure that you do have some layers to take off. And as you see in the vehicles, there's plenty of room for you to shed those layers and put them beside you, so you don't have to worry about not having enough space to bring stuff along with you. We will be driving in all sorts of terrain, but one of the most fun things to do in the Delta, of course, is driving through some of these water channels. And if you're there in the wet months like we spoke about, June, July, August, when the floods have arrived, often you will do crossings of these little water systems like that when you're out on your drive. So also something to look forward to while you're coming out there. People often ask how close can you get to the animals, and how close do they come to you? Well, we always give the animals as much space as they need, but you can see here behind me that I'm pointing to 2 lionesses, so they often do come quite close, and we will always take into account how comfortable you are feeling about the proximity to the animals, but they are so used to the vehicles often that we get incredibly close game viewing experiences with them. And again, totally dependent on your comfort level, but we would never put the animals or our guests at risk. So they do come quite close sometimes, but often they are quite far away, which leads to the requirement of having binoculars or something available that would get you, give you the opportunity to see them nice and close. Another vehicle that we might be utilizing while you're out on your trip is a boat. We often go out on little boat cruises, particularly around the Linyanti and Chobe areas. We will get the opportunity to get photographs from the water, like that elephant trunk that I showed you. This is us having a gin and tonic while we're looking at a beautiful elephant out on the boat. So another potential experience you could enjoy while you're out on safari. Many of you are not too sure about what to expect in the camps. And just to give you a feel for that, this is, of course, one of our camp's dining areas, sitting all around the table, overlooking a wonderful waterhole right in front of the lodge. There are no fences around these lodges, so the animals come and go as they please. And we have the wonderful sights and sounds of the bush around us. So you're totally immersed in nature while you're in camp. The meals are wonderfully homemade meals, anything from gourmet chef's meals to, like I said, hearty home-cooked meals from our local chefs. And there is no shortage of food or drink available in the camps. In fact, we often joke about it being really an eating safari that you will be going on in Botswana. So no shortage of food along the way, and certainly no shortage of creature comforts while you're in the bush as well. To give you a feel for that, some of our camps are quite luxurious, even though they are tented. You'll see that they don't particularly resemble any kind of tent you might have grown up using going on your weekend fishing trip with your folks. They are somewhat more luxurious and spacious, and some of them very, very comfortable indeed. All with ensuite bathrooms, some of them with full running water, bathtubs, etc., to some of our other camps that are a little bit more rustic, where you'd have bucket showers, which is basically a full shower system. The only difference is they will bring you a bucket full of water, of warm, nice hot water, so that you can have your full shower. It's not a lot of water, so sometimes we recommend that you do kind of a navy shower, wet yourself, soap up, and then rinse off with the rest of the water. But the camps are very accommodating. If you want to wash your hair or do some air conditioning, you can do that, and they'll actually bring you another full sack of water to rinse off your hair as well. So they really are accommodating, and there are many, many comforts in many of the camps that we go to. Just check your itinerary and chat with your adventure specialists about each of the camps and what to expect, but all of the information is in there. But it can be anything from super luxury tented like these ones to a little less so, with all the normal creature comforts, just not your usual running water or bathtubs, etc. Here's another picture of just the living area of one of the camps as well. And to give you a feel for the outside areas and the main areas of the lodges, this is kind of the thing that you could expect to see in some of the camps. As you can see, very comfortable, beautiful designs, and very much reliant on its outdoor adventure and outdoor feel for every one of the camps. But no shortage of luxury in any of the stops that we have. Just briefly, I know some of you might be doing the extensions out to Victoria Falls. This is a picture I took of Victoria Falls from a helicopter. You can do heli flips over the falls themselves. This was in a very high water time of year. The water of the Zambezi River, which is this river flowing over the falls themselves, does ebb and flow depending on the time of year. Around about June through to September is generally high water, and then after that heading into the low water, where it can look far different to what you see here at a very high water time of year. Doing the walk of the falls themselves, just comfortable shoes, anything that you're happy to get wet, particularly if you're there in a wet time of year. The spray from the falls alone can give you a good shower. But if you're there in the dry time of year, any comfortable shoes will do, even sandals if you're happy to do so. But it can get quite slippery in spots, so just bear that in mind if you are doing the walk of the falls on your visit to Botswana. And then just briefly, before we get to the questions, I just wanted to touch on luggage. You would have seen, or just on some things of what to pack and what to bring. You would have seen that many of the literature you would have had say that you need to bring a duffel bag along. And that is absolutely true. Because of the small planes that we use, there's often the need to have the soft bags in order to make it easy for us to pack them. Each of the trips will have a specific weight allowance that you're allowed to bring, but I would absolutely go for one of these duffel bags. I actually used this particular Patagonia duffel bag, and it has served me really well over the years. Anything that is strong, tough, has a little bit of resistance to it, and as I said, is soft enough that you can it can squish into the smaller parts of the bush planes that will be flying. This is definitely the kind of bag I would recommend that you bring along on safari. Another thing that I've really enjoyed utilizing over the years is packing cubes. I would definitely recommend bringing them. It makes things so much easier when it comes to changing camp. You know, all of our itineraries change camp every couple of days, so it just makes things so much easier to take all these little bags out that have all of your goodies separated in as well. Bringing along with you, of course, a backpack. Every time we go out on drive, on one of our activities or on one of our walks, we would recommend that you bring a backpack along with basically your day pack stuff in, from bottled water to binoculars, camera, sunscreen, hat, jacket, rain jacket, anything extra that you might need to bring along. And we always recommend that you have that in your backpack. So backpack and a nice duffel is definitely going to be helpful to you on your safari. Wet bags, you don't really need them. Some people like to bring them along for the dust that you do often encounter on safari, but certainly worth looking into. If you have some, bring them along. Adapters, most of the lodges will have adapters in camp, but if you are using any high-powered electronics like hair dryers or irons, curlers, things like that, you would need to check the voltage as well. Voltage is different down in Southern Africa, and you need to be aware of what you need to, or the proper adapters you need to have, so that you don't burn out your appliances that you might be thinking of bringing along. Most of the camps have full electricity, and you can utilize those appliances in the camp. Some of our more remote camps do not have the opportunity for you to do that, or enough power for you to do that, in which case you would have to go without a hairdryer for a couple of days. And again, just chat with your adventure specialist about your particular trip on where you would get your best opportunity for doing so. Out on safari, folks, most of your time is spent in vehicles. We get asked a lot about shoes and walking. While we do recommend doing some walks on safari, in many places in Botswana, we are not allowed to do walking safaris. Again, chat with your adventure specialist if you have the opportunity to do so on your particular itinerary. If you are going to be doing some walking, for sure, some good hiking shoes is always recommended. Walking poles if you need them, but most of our bush walks are generally very gentle, easy bush walks of about an hour to 2 hours, just exploring the smaller things and not focusing too much on the big animals, because you're on foot, and of course that is a little bit more risky. So for the most part, on game drive, all you need is comfortable sneakers, sometimes even sandals if you're happy to do so, particularly if it's warm. But it's totally up to you. Most people tend to go with comfortable sneakers, running shoes, things like that, and bring those with on safari. I use mostly trail running shoes as shoes that I would wear the majority of the time, and they seem to cover me for pretty much every need that you could have on safari. So think about that before you come as well. And then clothing wise, folks, because of the nature of safari, the early mornings, the weather can be very different and really can be 4 seasons in one day. I would recommend bringing layers, and particularly things that dry quickly. Tech clothing, there's a number of different brands you could look at. Stuff that dries quickly and that washes easily is always going to be the way to go. A nice jacket to keep you warm that you can take off if it does get too hot, and then a nice undershirt, even t-shirt that you can wear when it does warm up out on drive as well. So really you need to cover all your bases. What of course comes to mind for most people then is, okay, well, that's great, Russell. Well, how am I going to pack for a million different types of weather? Well, remember, all of these camps can and do laundry. So again, chat with your adventure specialist about that. Sometimes they're not capable of doing it, but that'll only be for a couple of days. So you will always have opportunity to get your stuff washed as you go. So you really don't need to overpack. And the teams have great lists of how many things to bring along. But honestly, 3 to 4 shirts, 3 t-shirts, 2 or 3 pairs of pants, and there's enough underwear for the trip, and a jacket, and you're pretty much good to go. So just bear that in mind. There is opportunity for laundry as you go, but you really do need to cover your bases when it comes to the weather. As I said, anything from sunny to cold. So if you're going in the winter months, certainly bring those warm things along. Even if you're going in the summer, it can't hurt. It just depends how cold you get. If you're someone who doesn't get cold, then don't worry. But I would always recommend having them along just in case, because you never know when you might need it. And of course, the big one, you're going to be out in the sun. So a good hat, sunscreen, and even a buff to help protect you from the sun is always a great addition. Another reason for the buff is it does get very dusty at times in Botswana. So the buff can be very helpful in just alleviating some of that dust while you're out on game drive. A headlamp and flashlight, always handy to have as well. I bring them along on every safari. Some of the camps will actually have some to lend you while you're in camp, but it really can't hurt to bring them along. Stick it in your backpack so that you've got it with you. One or the other is fine, particularly if you're going to some of our more wild camps. It's always nice to have a little headlamp or flashlight with you. Very important is binoculars. I really do recommend to any of you coming on safari to invest in a good pair of binoculars. They range from anywhere between $100 to $10,000. Honestly, it's very hard to judge which is good. There are a couple of good brands out there that I would look at, but chat to your friends, chat to your adventure specialists. They will give you an idea of what good brands are out there. Just off the top of my head, of course, Swarovski. These are very much top of the line binoculars and can run you quite a lot of money, $2,000, $3,000. But then there is Leica, there are Nikon, there are a bunch of others as well that I'm sure I'm missing that are wonderful binoculars. So just do some research into that, but make sure you bring a pair of binoculars, at least between per couple, or if you are traveling with a friend, that one of you has a pair of binoculars. And of course, a camera. You don't have to have a big giant camera. If you do have one, fantastic, bring it along. We always encourage some great photography on all of our trips, not just our photographic departures, but of course on our photographic departures we will focus even more on the photographic side of things. So having some good gear is always going to be beneficial to you on a trip with us. So walking safaris we spoke about. That's another experience that you can do. This is one of the walks we do in the Kalahari with the local Bushman tribes, which is always a wonderful experience as well. So how can you experience it? Well, there's a number of different departures. Some of you might be on some of these: secluded Botswana, Kalahari, the Delta and beyond, epic Botswana, Namibia safari, and of course our custom safari. So just chat with your adventure specialist or concierge about any of these things, and they'll be able to help you with anything that you are unsure of. And that's about it. I hope that has covered most things, and I've left enough time for questions. I'm just going to make sure my computer doesn't turn off. So over to you, Sunny. I'll be back in 1 second. Just going to make sure the power's on here quickly. Thank you.
Sounds good, Russell. Thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure to hear your stories and hear all about what this trip is about, because it is just, Botswana is amazing. I'm very jealous of everybody who gets to join you or any of our expedition leaders in Botswana. Before we start the Q&A, I just want to remind everyone that they can submit their questions via the questions field in the control panel. This is one of the popular ones that comes up pretty much every time. When you're out on a 4 or 5 hour safari, how do you handle restroom stops?
Okay, great question, and I'm sorry I missed it. Yes. So you see, for us guys, it's a little easier, and so we often don't give it too much thought. But the truth is, while you're out on drive, there are no bathrooms. So what do we do? Well, we have little, what we call vanity packs that we'll take out with us with paper, a little shovel, and we will basically find somewhere out in the bush anytime you need to go. And we will actually then go investigate behind a tree or a bush and make sure that it's safe for you, give you some privacy, and then give you the opportunity to do your business and use the loo with a view. And that tends to be the way of things, you know. So for some people, it's a bit tricky the first time. They've never done it before. But I can tell you now that most of our guests, by the end of the trip, have no worries going off into the bush while we're out on the drives. So that is certainly something that is a challenge for some folks. But unfortunately, that is the only way around it, because we generally will be out on drives for quite a long time in the mornings. Particularly, the evenings tend to be a little shorter on our drives, to be back generally before sunset, but it depends on where you are as well. So hopefully that answers the question. But yes, we will go out while we're out on drive in the bush.
Sounds good. This is sort of a cluster of questions, but I'm going to group it for you. Can you talk a little bit about the need for vaccinations or malaria medication, or if mosquitoes and other bugs tend to be an issue?
Okay, another great question. The truth is, I can't give a clear answer because it really is up to you and your medical professional. The areas that we travel to in Botswana are malaria areas, so it is a risk and it is something you have to be aware of. There are a number of different drugs available to you that you can take as preventatives. And then another thing, of course, that many people do, including most of us expedition leaders, is just try to keep ourselves protected. Long sleeves in the evening, mosquito repellent spray on any open skin, particularly in the evenings. These are the kinds of things that we would do to mitigate the potential issues with mosquitoes. The truth is, we're in very remote areas, often far away from people, so that sometimes you notice not as many mosquitoes as you would expect. I find that the Okavango particularly, or Botswana particularly, it doesn't have as many mosquitoes as you'd expect, especially around the southern parts of the Okavango and the Kalahari region. But it's certainly something to be aware of. Chat with your doctor about what you can and can't take from a medication standpoint, but I would definitely recommend chatting to your doctor beforehand about what would work best for you on your safari.
Great. Another cluster of questions around money. Do you suggest folks change money? Will there be safes in the accommodations, or will they need to carry that cash with them? Anything you can kind of offer in the way of how do you handle cash on these trips?
No, another great question. Look, the majority of camps that we go to are very remote. So the need for pula, the local currency, is not very high. You could get away with using US dollars cash for the majority of tipping, local tipping, if you were doing that, or even purchasing things. The opportunity for changing cash is quite limited. The only time you'd have that opportunity is either landing at the airport in Johannesburg before you move over to Botswana, or at the airport in Maun would be the only opportunities for you to get pula. I wouldn't go out of my way to get it. We were never really needed while we were in camp. As I said, most of the camp's shops, they all take either credit card or US dollars in camp as well. So really, there's no need to go out of your way. So I wouldn't bother too much with getting pula unless you wanted some for the memories. Unless you're specifically going to some of the markets, if you're going to even Victoria Falls and the markets in that area, even there, they will take US dollars. So honestly, I would go with more small denominations of US dollars rather than getting pula or even South African rands or anything like that. In terms of in the camps themselves, there are safes in just about all the camps. Again, chat with your adventure specialists about where there might not be. But as far as I can recall, just about every camp does have a safe in the room where you can keep your cash safely. I also travel with a little lock for my bag, my camera bag. I keep my passport and cash and all that stuff that I might need in that bag, and I do keep it locked in my room if I'm not around. So that's another thing you can also think of, just to be extra careful. But again, the camps are very safe, and we've had very few issues in that regard.
Okay. The next topic is food. Can you talk a little bit about accommodations that can be made for folks with special dietary needs? And, are snacks provided if somebody has diabetes? Will there be snacks provided during the day, or should they bring them? And then the last part of that is, will the local wild game be served on these trips?
Great questions. Okay, first let's tackle the dietary requirements. Absolutely, all of the camps will go out of their way to accommodate just about any dietary requirement you might have, whether it be a severe allergy all the way through to just a preference. You just don't like fish or whatever it might be. The camps can and do really go out of their way to accommodate that, from gluten-free to you name it. We can always put in the request, and they will do just about everything in their power to accommodate you. So there's always opportunity for that, and certainly not something to put you off your safari. They will make a plan for you to make sure you stay well fed on trips. Occasionally, there will be the opportunity to get local game meat. It would never be from the park or reserves themselves. Some areas in Southern Africa actually farm certain types of wild animals, and that is sometimes what you can see on the menu. But again, most of our trips, we avoid those kinds of menus, and so it's unlikely you would get that unless you particularly requested it in advance. So they really can accommodate you. The food is really excellent. If you get the opportunity while you're out on your trip, go and have a look in the kitchen. Go and have a chat with the chef. They're always very excited to have some of the guests go and check out the crazy conditions they have to cook these amazing meals for us under. And it's always humbling to see, what they do for us, and the amazing food they put out with the resources that they have in the middle of nowhere in Africa. So I hope that covers all of the points. Did I miss anything?
Did you talk about snacks or people with diabetes? Like, will water and
Oh,
snacks
yes.
be provided?
Yes, thank you. Snacks, plenty. On the vehicles, on our drives, all of our activities, if there's anybody who needs it, we will bring extra. But even on our normal drives, we go out with snacks, cookies, various little trinkets that we'll bring along on morning drive. And then in the afternoon, we bring out a bunch of sundowner snacks as well. As I mentioned in our chats before, you'd stop for a coffee in the morning, and in the evening, stop for a drink to watch the sun go down, as is this picture in front of us now. So plenty of opportunity for that. And again, if there is any necessity, we will make sure that there are always snacks available. on the vehicle while we're out on game drive.
And water also is easily accessible.
Yes, ma'am. So all of the camps will provide fresh drinking water for free. It will be in your rooms, and we will also have it in the vehicle on every drive, from the morning drive to the evening drives. But we will also, of course, recommend that you bring along your water bottles, your Nat Hab water bottles. We will fill those up with potable water at every location all the time, just to avoid the amount of plastic bottles that we would utilize in the bush. But we obviously utilize very clean water, generally goes through a reverse osmosis system. So it's very, very clean and very nice water actually to drink. So that's what we utilize on our drives. And again, always available. As I said, it's an eating safari. We'll keep you fed and watered from start to finish.
That's the truth. We'll have, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. This is a common question as well. Traveling in open vehicles. Can you explain how that's safe? Why that is not a danger to travel through open vehicles through the
It's a
bush?
good question. And again, it actually just comes down to time. When we first started doing these kinds of safaris in these regions, the animals would run away. They heard the vehicle and they would be anxious. They would hear people and know that people were dangerous, and they'd run away. So it's really taken generations of these animals in these protected areas to learn that they are not going to be persecuted from the vehicles. And that habituation over time has allowed us to have the safari experience that we do have now. And that is the main reason that they don't run away. And it's also the main reason that it is safe. There is a natural boundary around that vehicle that the animals just don't cross. We are also very careful about their own personal space. And sometimes the animals will come to us, utilize the side of the vehicle to get some shade in the heat of the day. Lions have done that many times with me out on a trip. But the truth is, they're just not interested in the vehicle and the people in it as food. They're not interested in us as a threat. Really, we are simply part of the environment. And so that's why we're able to do these trips, because the animals are habituated and used to the vehicles. In some regions that we travel, every now and again, we might come across an individual animal that actually has spent most of its life in wild areas where it hasn't seen a vehicle, and they will see us and often immediately run away. Excuse me. And that is a sign that shows you that that animal has not been in the area for a long period, because they do get more and more used to the vehicles over time. And that's why it is safe. And as I say, we do a lot of training, learning about animal behavior and how they react to us, and learning if and when they're uncomfortable in any way, and then we will back out of that situation.
Well, I think that is the last question we have time for today. But I just want to thank everybody for submitting their questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but please do find your adventure specialist or reach out to the concierge to get any questions answered that were not addressed today. And I also want to remind everybody that you will receive a replay link, so you can watch this over and over again until you've absorbed all of the information that Russell has shared. I know there's a lot, so don't worry if you don't remember all of it right now. I just want to turn it back to you for any closing comments you might have.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, same as you. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to all of your questions, everyone, and I'm sorry if I missed some things that you weren't sure about. I wish I could answer them all for you. But unfortunately, I'm off on safari in the next couple of days, so I won't be able to answer them. But send them through. We'll do our best to get all of your queries out the way. All I can say to you is you will not regret your safari to Botswana. It will be a life-changing experience. It changed my life. I go back for fun every chance I get. So enjoy your trips. And for those of you who are still thinking about it, get on it. We'd love to see you down here and love to see you on a safari. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks again, Russell. It is such a pleasure to absorb your knowledge and hear your passion, and I cannot wait to someday get back to Botswana, hopefully with you. I also want to
Thank
thank
you, sir.
everybody for tuning in. Please join us again tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, we'll conclude the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.